Thanks for listening to the Replatform podcast, sponsored by Crown Peak and Elastic Path and hosted by me, James Gale and Paul Rogers. We bring you interviews with industry thought leaders, the C-suite of tech companies and leading retail brands, showcase e-com tech to help you decide what's relevant to your business and hopefully discover new solutions and new ideas. In return, all we ask is that you tell people about the podcast, get us out to as many people as you know about, and share or like our posts on social media. And if you are new to the show, the best thing you can do is give us a rating wherever you're listening or watching. It really does help with our visibility. So let me set up our new episode. For those of you who've been following the podcast for a while, you'll recognise our guest. He's been on a few times before, has one of the top rated episodes as well. So let's see if we can smash that one, say. But our topics are really interesting. So we've known Jim for quite a while. We've interviewed him when he was at Big Commerce before. He's general manager there. He's got a lot of knowledge around the overall e-com industry, and now as CEO of Patchworks is really well placed with an integration specialist to understand where the demand for technology is coming, what integrations are people really pushing on, what new tech's coming in, which platforms are critical, what are the repeat integrations that are happening. So we're doing an episode on the movers and shakers and e-com integrations. What tech's trending, which platforms are most demand. Let's get that wider view set on the market. So Jim, a warm welcome. Welcome back to the podcast, sir.
Thank you very much, James. Great to be here.
Yeah, looking forward to this because I've been really enjoying the posts that Patchwork have been putting out in the last few months around like the release notes, updates, what the new integrations are. It's exciting to see what tech's being connected. So before we start asking those questions, for those who haven't come across Patchworks before, do you want to just give a quick flavour for what it is and also what your role there is, what you're focused on?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to do it. So Patchworks is what's been now termed an integration platform as a service. I was looking at the Gartner hype cycle for digital tech, and it's now on the plateau of productivity, I'm very pleased to say. And the idea of iPaaS, integration platform as a service, is basically to make integration as easy as possible. So the kind of high level view I've been pitching to people, certainly kind of non-techies, people outside of our industry, when they ask what we do, is that we're technical glue, right? And so it's all about making it as easy as possible to take one system and integrate them with another one. So, we mentioned before, and, go back and listen to previous episodes, I'll moan on about what a nerd and techie I am. That's what I used to do for a living, right? Actually, most of the work I did, because I was never a front-end programmer, was gluing systems together, and it was tens of thousands of lines of code. And it would take, X number of months or days to make that work and go through UAT. And then if you wanted to change the integration, you had to call me back and I would raise an invoice and would go again, if you know what I mean. iPaaS takes all that away. It makes it, the idea being basically a web-based interface that says, take my Shopify store, connect it through to my NetSuite store using a kind of low-code, no-code environment to make it as easy as possible and as quick as possible to go live. And so, we're one of many. There are a bunch out there, and obviously I've been concentrating the last few months to make ours the easiest to use as possible.
Great. And we'll come back onto that low code, no code movement in a second. The first question, so James and I were talking for like 1 to 2 minutes before you joined this call about the kind of state of the industry, I guess, and like what's happening and trends we're seeing around CapEx projects and, where people are moving. You, similarly to us, spend a lot of time chatting to lots of different types of people. What's your view on the last 12 months in terms of e-com tech and, Mac, headless, composable? Where do you see the industry at the moment?
It's a really interesting space actually right now. And actually being at Patchworks, because we are that glue, we are in the middle of all these projects. Not only do we get to go to the conferences, have the conversations, we're in the middle of a lot of these projects. People are contacting us, quite often. It would be, I need to put in a new RP. Let's go and talk to Patchworks about that. At the minute, a lot of it is I need to connect to a marketplace, or I need to add in this new piece of tech that's going to hopefully grow my top line, or maybe cut out some costs on the bottom line with a better 3PL or a 3PL that's more suited to what I need right now. So we're getting a lot of those calls. I mean, the industry is in an interesting spot, and it's, we don't exist in a bubble outside of economic conditions, right? So I'm thinking back to the last e-commerce expo, really interesting, really busy. I went on the first day. I think we didn't have a stand. It was a sort of deliberate decision for us while we were getting the new tech ready to get it out there. And, there's a bit of a lag to go and get a stand. But we all turned up in our Patchworks hoodies. I don't think I made it halfway across the floor for having conversations with people who wanted to talk to us and wanted to talk about the industry. And coming out of the show afterwards and going to one of the pubs and having conversations with people, I think what was interesting about that show was that if you were in the mid-market space, you had an amazing show. And, this is the feedback I received afterwards as well. So if you were Shopify, Shopline, BigCommerce, you had a great show. There were people coming up to you that had real projects. If you were in the enterprise space, you had a terrible show. And I think that kind of reflects where the market is a little bit because, some of the big guys, we just seen Whittle go into administration on Friday last week. Two winners have been recorded. Where a friend of mine's now the CTO, sadly. So, that's kind of I've been texting them over the weekend about some of the reasons why things may have happened there. And, it's been hard because you've got massive cost base to deal with. And you've got these mid-market guys, the democratization of e-commerce that we should talk about at BigCommerce is a real thing, right? So those mid-market guys can start cannibalizing market share off the big people. The big people have got a certain amount of inertia that they have to overcome with the tech that they've got. And I think that's really, really recognized in the space. So I think this year, if you look at like the headless projects, the Mac projects, then there's been less of them because of the capital investment required and because of some kind of horror stories that have been out there, have been coming to light over the last maybe year. I know John Williams at Ampian's calls them the Maclash on that side of it. But also, why? Because actually, at the end of the day, people are just out there wanting to sell what they sell online in other channels. And actually, probably the easier and quicker way of doing that is with some of these, easy-to-use SaaS platforms that give you some of that out of the box.
Crown Peak, enabling organizations to build meaningful digital experiences for everyone, everywhere. Engage your customers with our content management system, reach your entire audience with our digital accessibility and quality tools, and grow your brand with our product discovery solution. Find out more at crownpeak.com.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's pretty similar to what we were kind of concluding. That takes us nicely onto the low-code piece. So I think even, what you were talking about around the kind of enterprise projects, like maybe that kind of £1 to £20 million like change projects, like I agree, there's not as many of those at the moment. And the kind of mid-market, like smaller builds that don't require that same level of kind of senior developer resources anymore. That's a big shift in the market, and obviously Patchworks kind of embracing that at the moment, or at least from some of the stuff that you've put on LinkedIn, it looks like you're kind of embracing that. Can you talk us through what you've changed so far to kind of adopt some of these principles and how you see it changing in the long term as well?
Yeah, certainly. I'm happy to. It's really it's an interesting one, no code, low code. It means a lot of things to a lot of people, right? And genuinely, back in 1993, I worked at IBM. I am old. I turned 50 this year, by the way. So it's my first podcast with you guys as a 50-year-old. It's an interesting place to be. We had these Wednesday innovation sessions at the Hersley Labs, and they would sort of show things that were happening. And they showed some coding tech around some of the new object-oriented languages that are coming out, where you can literally draw lines between boxes, click on them, add some code in. It all looked amazing. It actually was what was meant to be Visual Age, which became Eclipse for the developers who are listening. And obviously it never really came to fruition because I think the tech was just too cutting edge. But I remember watching it thinking, this is amazing. This is going to change the world. And I also watched it as a developer walking out of the room thinking, will I have a job going forward? I think, fast forward to where we are on the integration side, that's exactly what we have been aiming to build as Patchworks, something that is more about drawing flows in a web page, effectively, in our interface. Whereas the previous no-code, low-code Patchworks, before we got the new services out there, was still no-code, low-code. You could do things, but it was a bit more. How can I put it? It was less visual. It was a little bit more point and click. You still had to have real technical knowledge, so you probably have to be a business analyst had on knowledge of NetSuite, for instance. Whereas the idea of what we have right now is it's much, much easier for people, front-end developers, say, to come in and do that integration back-end using this more graphical interface that the product team had. Basically, if you look at where we were, January, I met the team, we sat down, we looked at what was there already. They had this in alpha. They needed ring fencing, so I ring fenced that team to deliver that project, and we went live in June. We had a customer live in it immediately, one of Shopline's customers that needed to integrate through to a WMS that I don't think I've ever found that connector in any other iPad system. So they were able to use Connector Builder to connect to it and then use our process flows to map it all up. And over the last few months, it's been about delivering more and more of those shapes. So we delivered a dedupe shape in last month. So deduplication from, say, FTP, if you're picking up a load of orders and you need to go through, cycle through, that would have been a script. And the idea is just to, again, move that into a low-code, no-code shape. So that, again, you have to write a minimum amount of scripts to use the platform. Where that's going is again, making it even easier again to take those process flows that have been built, maybe template them. So if you're an agency delivering on Patchworks, and I'm really pleased to say that, we're up to 54 agency partners now. We've got sort of 10 that I would call, properly certified and delivering projects on the platform. They can take those process flows and have their own library. So they can have a reference architecture they can take to all their customers. Again, the idea being that you go live more quickly, that you go live on time at probably a lower budget than you would have done if you're writing on that code I talked about at the start of this. And that when it is all running, there's that kind of wisdom of the crowds thing. All our K8 servers and Redis queues and all the stuff that we have reliably work. Because that's the other key thing, right? All that low-code, no-code stuff is just an admin interface. Once you've done it, you never want to have to go back to it. You just want the orders to crank on through and then the data to flow back and forth. Future-wise, looking at AI, obviously, everyone else is looking at AI. We've got one of my developers is looking at some of that custom scripting. We've already been using it, but actually integrating in AI into the platform potentially to write those scripts for you. Particularly, one of the key features of our custom scripting is you can pretty much use any language. We support 10 at the minute, and by language I mean technical language. So Python, Node, C#, etc. But if you really wanted to use Rust or something, you could configure it into the platform because of the kind of unique way we built this, which is cool. What's the classic thing you do? You look at it in one language and think, actually, I want it in another language. Well, ChatGPT will rewrite that for you and it will work out just straight away without any debugging required. I've been doing it myself. So more integration into that, and then more integration into kind of like pre-built apps effectively. So you can say, for one of those kind of reference applications that I've talked about before, or maybe it is a kind of multi-storefront compatible NetSuite connector. There's an app for that, and you can just install it, and then basically you put in your details and you're done. The integration's been done. It's all about using those tools to accelerate the key vision of our platform, really, which is to make integration as easy to do as creating an e-commerce store.
I'd love to know what the driver for this was, because I looked and I've seen some of your videos on YouTube. I like the one you showed of like using the OpenAI to take product data out of a PIM and then create a translated version, push it back into a PIM. And that is just a relatively basic flow considering what it can do on the levels it can go down to. But did this come from you've got more recently SaaS background, haven't you? BigCommerce, you've worked in that ecosystem where you've got loads of tools like Klaviyo, where business users are used to that type of flow versus a technical user who can build out scripts. Is that where the motivation came for Patchworks? As well, actually, business users are using these tools and they're used to this visual, and therefore we should replicate that visual state. Is that it, or has this been in the pipeline for even longer but just hasn't been brought to market?
It's a bit of both. So this product started out in the minds of the product team who are over in Belfast, right? A lot of them are kind of ex-Boomi, ex-Chain Reaction. So they've been used to using iPad platforms, and it frustrated them as developers how difficult they were finding using iPads ultimately. And user experience, it's an interesting one because, again, I've always been a techie guy, but I work with a couple of fantastic UX leaders and creative leaders in my time in agency land. And one of them I remember putting up, what's good about a car? Well, it's the fact that the controls are pretty much the same on every single car. You wouldn't create a car with a square steering wheel, although Tesla have. And I think I've used this before. And again, you wouldn't create it with the accelerator on the left because you wouldn't understand how to use it, right? So user experience is really key to everybody. And if you can make the user experience so easy to use that you can open up integrating other systems into business users, not just for the creation of it, but also for the fixing of it as well. Maybe the data change and it starts to break the order flow. If you can provide the tools to say what's happening, this order is not going through because this attribute is no longer there, and you can make the mapping easy enough that someone can go, oh, I know how to do this. I go look at the online help, click on the mapping, say, go through, test it, make sure it's okay, then deploy it. Then again, it's in everybody's interest, bluntly, whether you're a developer or not, to be honest with you. It's and the key thing really, especially in this economic climate for businesses, is making sure that they can, spend less money and go live more quickly so they can recognize the benefits of any launches.
Elastic Path is on a mission to break through the barriers that prevent commerce leaders from delivering extraordinary shopping experiences. Both business and tech teams are able to innovate on their own terms, fully embrace composability, and in turn, never compromise on what's possible. Learn more at www.elasticpath.com.
Yeah, I find it interesting because it takes what traditional iPaaS was, which is just exchanging data between systems fluently so that you have that efficiency, and actually turn it into a tool that can do task management as well and transformation, which is really interesting. Let's talk about the tech space then, because see at Patchworks, you get quite a good view of what everyone wants, not just the market, but individual businesses, different verticals, what tools they're using. Let's look at the e-com platform level, because that always changes, but there's a core set of platforms that always seem to be like the Gartner quadrants, the Forrester waves. We've seen a few changes recently. What are you seeing? What's most active? Which are the most in-demand underlying vendor platforms where people are wanting integrations on? Have there been any fundamental changes? Are there any specific functional areas, whether that's search and merch personalization, that are really going up in demand for you?
I'll answer the vendor platform first. And obviously I came from Ecommerce to Patchworks. And I actually sponsored an event with Ecommerce. It's kind of my sort of a leaving present earlier this year. So I got to meet all the guys back in Austin again. And I expressed my frustration of the number of customers on Shopify that I'd never heard of, i.e. they never entered my deal pipeline. Probably because people were just buying Shopify because, I think Shopify is almost becoming the IBM of e-commerce. There used to be a phrase back in the day that, you don't get fired for buying IBM. And Shopify is the safe choice. It's got the brand, it's got the product, and it's got, thousands, tens of thousands of referenceable customers that you can say, they're doing it. So that's why I did that, Mr. Board member. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. So Shopify has been Shopify NetSuite bluntly is how Patchworks will really went forward, and then Shopify PeopleVox as well. That's where we made our historical money. And actually, that as a group is probably certainly Shopify the vendor. I'm still on number one source of external leads. What everybody wants to integrate now. Why is that? It's good software, right? We've always said that. The guys at Ecommerce would say that when they were standing up talking about it. The same with the guys at Shopline when they talk about them as competitors, because it is very, very good software. I mean, I've run a friend's store on Shopify for a few years, to be honest. Never mentioned that on the BC podcast. And so I know how good and how easy to use it is. Right? I mean, that's what a lot of it boils down to. It demos brilliantly well. And I guess where it's going with the investment that the team at Shopify are putting into the product and moving it more into the enterprise, not surprisingly, that trickles down and the mid-market guys get the benefit of that as well. So on the vendor side, we're seeing loads of Shopify. Shopline has started well. You probably saw the in-style press releases that went out on the back of that. That was a very quick project. So the guys over at the Shopline EMEA team won that earlier this year. I know they've won quite a lot, I think, compared to the state of their brand, bluntly. It's brand new ultimately. So I know how hard that is getting that into the market. But there's also some people kind of worrying about GDPR. I mean, it's all hosted in the EU, I'm pleased to say, from that side of it. And, at the end of the day, bluntly, I'm not only friends with the people over there, but actually I'll answer, with Patchworks, we answer a need they have for integrations that they don't have anywhere else. Not surprising, I'm working closely with them as we are with Shopify as well. And then, of course, BigCommerce as well. They are still winning stuff, but they seem to be winning in the upper mid-market, I think, from what I can see externally and from what we are getting in as leads, which is to deal with a multi-storefront customer on Friday over in the North America. So they are still winning. I think they're still winning on the strength of their APIs, actually, interestingly, and the kind of their Mac Alliance membership. But again, that's kind of like the upper mid-market where there's probably still movement there, as opposed to the large enterprises. I'm not seeing much going on with that. There's a bunch of new players, and of course the Commerce Tools of this world. Commerce Tools is still doing well. We've got a great customer in Trinity London on Commerce Tools right now, which is looking good. And look, I'm going to talk about some publicly known information. Craig, it's Scales Brothers just on there. So there's nothing else going on other than that, but I find that interesting. And, I met with Craig the other day. Scale looks like very, very good software. It's composable, but it's pre-composed. And I think that's what all the composable vendors need to think about ultimately is, if you're going to go down the purely composable route, one of the issues with it, and I'm talking a lot in these answers, guys, so I hope it's okay. But one of the issues with it is you're purely in the hands of the people on the team that are building that project. And therefore not saying it's just the agency, the people in the retailers team as well, right? And so that's kind of where we were back in 2003 to sort of 2010, even with Hybris and ATG, although they kind of came with a shop in a box. It wasn't really until Hybris started doing their accelerators. It wasn't a real shop, if you know what I mean. You had to start from scratch. And then it's up to the team that delivers it, right? And so some of them are brilliant. Trini, are doing a great job. I know there are some other really good Commerce Tools and Commerce Layer builds up there that are fantastic and put the business at the center of what's being done. There are other ones out there where you have to raise a ticket to change a facet. And that is ridiculous in this day and age, right? And so I think this pre-composed approach that Scale and Centra have gone with is really interesting in that space. And I guess for me personally, and probably one of the reasons I left BC as well, though, it's a bit of a crowded space now, e-commerce and the e-commerce platforms. And actually, if you're going to go down that SaaS route, you've got loads of choice. If you're not, you've still got Magento in their non-SaaS, where there are still people doing great work. Actually, they don't want to go down the SaaS route, which makes it interesting conversation for me to have with them when they've got rid of SaaS everywhere else in their business. And by the way, the iPad is going to be SaaS. I'm sure you can imagine that doesn't go very far. But it's how can I put it? I think for me, as a conclusion to that long diatribe, there's a big Ottawa giant, as Kelly called it the other day on LinkedIn, does seem to be increasingly winning more and more bluntly because of their investment in the product. And that's what all the other vendors have got to think about, is how they can differentiate.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's investment in product. And me and Paul talks about it because we've always had the battle. I always have had a very soft spot for BigCommerce. I like the culture and the ecosystem in there. And Shopify felt like it was more focused on itself. But what they've done with the product and the marketing around additions is so smart. They're doing the opposite of what some of the legacy big vendors are doing, which is rely on the name and rely on the belief that you are still the most important because you've got a big platform, but not think about the product evolution and what modern businesses and modern e-com teams want. Shopify's just gone, right, what do the e-com guys not like about us? Remove that barrier. And the other interesting about that is that big platforms where people are on likes of Salesforce before, when no one would have ever considered a Shopify. Now you've got quite a few examples of migrations that even I guess between SME and enterprise level where people have gone, well, actually, that's not a barrier anymore. And I want to come back to that. You said about scale. So we've been talking to Craig. We had a look at the platform. Quite impressed. Did a podcast with them that's due to come out shortly. Depending on which order people listen to these episodes, that is. And I like what they're doing as well. What I'm interested in is because you mentioned Centra, who we also have done work with and think very good. You've got these additional new ones. You've got Shopline that's trying to expand in the UK as well. Are you seeing yet demand from your customers, your e-commerce customers, for these connectors? Or is this at the moment those connectors are being built out as part of the vendor's go-to-market strategy, ready for the pipeline? I'd love to know what's driving the current connectors.
Yeah, it's Some of the connectors are because, the vendor wants to do it, bluntly, and we're building it. Building connectors is pretty easy, right? It takes probably, I don't know, between 2 and 12 hours to actually build the connector to a system, and then a bit of time to test it, right? So if there's a 2-hour build, say it's a 3PL with only 5 endpoints, there's a couple of those that we've got in there. We can knock that together incredibly quickly, as per the sort of connector builder video part with Commerce Layer, actually, but with 1 endpoint, which was 4.5 minutes. I managed to get that done in. Then you've got to test it, though, right? So the testing always takes time because you've got to go through and make sure the pagination works and all the kind of boring, nerdy stuff around each endpoint. So if you've then got scale, where you've got hundreds of endpoints, that takes a little bit longer. But we're investing the time in that. Some of our partners, Klaviyo, built their own connector, Ship Theory built their own connector. So if you go into our marketplace, that's kind of my vision, is that other people can start building those connectors and put them in the marketplace. So if they want to have an iPad as part of their go-to-market strategy, they don't need to ask us to do it. They can just do it, basically. Sign a partnership deal with us. If you look at scale and some of those ones in the UK, not so much in terms of leads, but actually in mainland Europe, we've got sort of Dutch partners and German partners say they want to use those connectors. Could you make sure that it includes this? Can we work on this bit together? So I would say and that's not a massive surprise, right? Because Centra and Scale coming from Europe or the Nordics, which is part of Europe, obviously, coming into our platform, we do have a platform that supports European data, not surprisingly. So it's more that we're getting those leads from there than the UK at the moment, bluntly. But I'm sure we will, having seen the plans, like you said, the Scale are putting in there, and Centra particularly being so strong in fashion as well. We came up against them a number of times at BC. We won a couple, we lost a couple. And when we did lose, and I was having a chat at the Applied Digital drinks in August, the search bot on, when we did lose, it's because of that fashion strength, right? They really, really get fashion. So, and that for me is an interesting kind of part of this kind of multi-layered number of vendors in the e-commerce space. It's almost, if you look at one end, the composable end, you're sort of saying that I've got this curing machine, you can make it anything you like, and you can, that's great. And then you're starting to come back to almost, we are fashion specialists, you're fashion, why don't we talk? And there are fashion specialists, ERPs out there as a great example. So kind of makes sense that a stack, if it's purely fashion, that would cover off, your curing group, that would cover off every single one of your properties, right? Because they're all fashion, really, with maybe a little bit of beauty in there as well. And so you can see why it become attractive to particular customers.
That makes sense. And I guess we've talked about the platforms quite a lot in this episode so far. You just mentioned Ship Theory, Klaviyo. It feels like a lot of people are, investing in like BIs and CDPs and that kind of stuff at the moment. What new third-party tools are you seeing demand for via customers at the moment?
Marketplaces are right up there, which is an interesting one because we're not a channel management platform. We are a pure data platform, really, right? So you could use us to recreate channel engine or Feedonomics or Channable or Intelligent Reach or whatever. But you'll notice we announced a deal with Channel Engine because actually, we're a software platform, really. So they can use us to connect to say, OnBuy or TikTok Marketplace if they needed to. If they didn't have that in, most of them do. So TikTok Marketplace seems to be generating a lot of buzz. And some people are doing it really, really well. Ben Murin and Sociable Guys have got a number of customers that they're doing that work for. I think the interesting thing is it's the old Reddit meme, isn't it? One, have idea, two, do this, ... make money. I think a lot of people see TikTok and go, we'll do that. But actually, you've got to build an audience. You've got to have the right product. You've got to create your TikToks in the right way. Again, that's almost about the democratization of advertising, really, isn't it? The most popular TikToks are the ones that have real people from a real company in a warehouse doing something. You know what I mean? But I'd say marketplaces are definitely one of the hot topics, probably as we come into Black Friday, Cyber Monday as well, though. It's almost what can we add in quickly to try and drive top line on the back of that. A lot of stuff around CDP and knowing your customer. I mean, certainly with, iOS 17, the various cookie restriction things that have been going on over the years. the ability to understand your customers and potential customers in a way that's still compliant with all legislation has led to a rise in the CDPs that are out there. And so we're getting more and more people asking for that as well. And then actually it's a lot of POS this year. And I think that's probably come down to the fact that if you look at COVID, we had to buy online, the shops were closed, but the consumer, I think, is a little bit more savvy when it comes to shopping now, and they will happily, if they go into a store and the POS experience matches better what's online, and maybe there is a way to scan a QR code or use an NFC tag on your phone so it knows it's you, and therefore you get your personalized offers in store. I mean, we've been promising it for years. I think the pandemic now kind of coming out of it, the other side of it, despite us all having cough and colds today, makes you think that actually, the POS, looking at POS has been really important. So I've had a couple of conversations with a couple of very large enterprise customers this year that said that this year all we're really doing is concentrating on getting POS and ERP right. Because I need to make sure that I can do, collect in store very, very well, for instance, because it means I can drop my delivery costs, which means I sell more online. But then when I'm in store, I've got sophisticated POS. Again, I can upsell more when I'm in there. And I think that's that kind of whole customer view, which has led to the concentration on that sort of CDP and POS approach.
And you mentioned marketplaces, and we all know that marketplace e-commerce has been growing, and there's been people building capabilities in their own platforms to sell from other brands. There's been people wanting to connect to existing marketplaces. And I noticed you in your recent release notes, I think it's from October's, you announced a Miracle Connector. Have you got any insights you can share with people?
Yeah.
Is this specific to particular verticals you're seeing? Because I've definitely seen in the last 12 to 18 months, I think fashion brands specifically have spent a lot more time and effort trying to extend marketplace capability. Is it restricted to like fashion? Is it across the verticals you work with? What insights have you got for us?
I think it's fashion and gifting. We're seeing a lot of that, and a bit of beauty as well. Again, because it allows if you go with a Miracle or a marketplace, and you want to integrate that into your site, which is Jules. Sadly, I think that they are still trading, aren't they? But they're trading via somebody else. I can remember the big Miracle integration they did at Friends of Jules led to the Christmas product. I think it's 5 or 6 years ago, being a Christmas tree. They don't sell Christmas trees, right? But it was their top selling product because they were able to get it via a marketplace. And so, because there's two sides to marketplaces, right? There's just selling on them as the retailer, and then there's bolting some uplift revenue into your own customer, either your own website or your own store, ultimately via a marketplace, and getting other people's products on your curated, but on your product list. So, yeah, definitely fashion, obviously, like you said, and then gifting in as well, because that Christmas tree example is another example of somebody being able to say, what can we offer products that are like or similar to, or create a collection of stuff that we don't sell. So it might be a fashion company that wants to be able to go into something that's not a fashion item, but is related to it, like phone cases or something along those lines, kind of complete the look. So we've seen something around there as well. But that's it, really. I mean, you're right. I've not really seen a huge amount. I mean, I know in terms of if you go on Buy or Temu or on the kind of direct-to-consumer marketplaces, there's loads of consumer electronics, but I've managed to make sure that I told my son not to buy anything from those, but for obvious reasons. Because I remember I did some dropshipping stuff back in the BC days, and some speakers turned up. I wouldn't buy them again. That's what I'm going to say.
So one of the things that James and I saw in your October release notes was an integration with Salsify. So around the PIM side, have you seen an uplift in demand? Not just with Salsify, but other vendors as well.
Yeah, we have, definitely. I think if you look at the Salsify being our platform, it's very much on the PIM side of things. We've also got Pimbly, Akinio, Plytix in there, and there are more PIM vendors coming to us. And I think it's because, personally, as we've got more sophisticated over the last 3 or 4 years, the product numbers have gone up. Maybe that product numbers come up from a marketplace as well, coming back to the sort of previous question. And people are now realizing that the product data has a direct impact on the conversion rate, and a direct impact on what you can actually sell online, in store, etc. So we are seeing actually quite a few customers going live and then coming back sometimes to us saying, would you recommend a PIM? We always say, no, we wouldn't, but, you must have an agency partner who can help you with that and maybe run a selection process. But we are seeing an increase in PIM projects, basically, to get a real handle on that product data, maybe take it out of the ERP, which is quite often where it is, but it's always a very small amount of product content in an ERP. And I think if you're looking at the different channels that are out there, so maybe you want to take it in from the ERP, enrich it, make sure they work on mobile and on web and on app maybe, or in print even. That's still a big, still a big channel to market by a lot of, there's a lot of retailers out there. And then maybe run that through one of our channel engine type partners. Ultimately, you can take those descriptions, now that we know they're good and working, and push them out onto the marketplaces in the right format. So we are, I don't know if that's all the reasons for seeing it, but we're definitely seeing more people looking for more PIM projects. And it's interesting from a transactional perspective for iPads, because, we charge a pretty much a base fee per connector. I mean, it's changing slightly. We've got editions now. I'm not going to go into that. It's not a sales pitch. But the interesting thing is, of course, then there's got to be a transaction override. That's how we get charged to run a profitable business. You need to make sure that you're reflecting somehow the cost of it to other people. What is a transaction in the case of a PIM, right? Because it's all about how many products there are, how many product updates there are, how often they happen a day. It can get a bit gnarly, bluntly, and explaining that through to people and understanding if it's the right way to do things. But it's been brilliant, though, seeing the PIM vendors getting excited about Patchworks, and then things that you mentioned earlier, James, about the, getting into a PIM and then using generative AI maybe to create longer descriptions or to translate things by one of our translation partners. That gets super interesting, I think, because the power of AI is that it gives a mid-market retailer the capabilities of a large retailer in terms of things like content translation. And then it allows you, again, to punch well above your weight and win market share based on your brand and product.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point, because one of the valid criticisms I've seen of the PIM vendor space is sometimes the speed to innovation is not as quick as it is in other areas. Like if you watch the speed to innovation, like the search merge personalization, it feels quicker to get features released. But the ability to then connect and to achieve those additional elements you want and to automate it, to potentially take away that headache of, well, when can I do this in this tool? Yeah, interesting. That's been really interesting. Thanks for taking the time to come on. As always, I love these discussions because we've all got slightly different perspectives based on the projects we work on and the customers we work with. I think it's good for people to hear and learn what other people's takes are on the market. So thanks for taking the time to come on and share what the Patchworks inside of you is, Jim.
No problem at all. Thank you for having me. I mean, these are my views, not the views of Patchworks. I probably should point that out. But again, I think what's really interesting, what's important for us all, is to have that choice in the marketplace. It's no good for anybody if there's one dominant or supremely dominant player. The ability to choose between a number of different composable vendors, a number of different out-of-the-box SaaS vendors, and these kind of new blended pre-composed vendors, I think is on the platform side particularly really interesting. And again, I'll say we're not the only iPaaS out there. I just believe that we are the best. There's the plug.
You're doing so well until the end of this podcast.
Always the way.
Thanks very much for coming on. I always enjoy chatting to you. Thanks everyone for listening. Hope you enjoyed it. Anything you agree with, disagree with, let us know. Fire in the comments. And Jim's always up for being challenged. Get hold of him on LinkedIn. Let him know what you think of the market. And keep your ears open for the next episode. We drop one every week. And don't forget before you go to give us that rating if you haven't already. Thanks, everybody. For more information on this topic, head over to replatform.fm for our audio podcasts. To discuss a project, or if you'd like to chat about any of the topics covered in this episode in more detail, please reach out to myself, James Gurd, or my co-host, Paul Rogers, via LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks again for listening, and keep your ears peeled for the next episode.